Welcome to Epic Flail. We're here on the couch, boys. We've mixed it up.
Hello.
We've gone for the full studio setup with a flag on a table.
It's nice. It's
couch. I really called it something else, then we'll just call it a couch. It's just a couch. Welcome to the couch, my friends. We're talking about Old World with two wonderful normal men, friends of the channel.
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you boys in the studio.
Hello,
Looking
mate.
forward to getting in to some Old World chat. Like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you're joining us live, fire these fine men some questions. Whatever you want. It could be about Old World, or it could just be a bit of life advice that you want. And they're both very wise people, so I would suggest the odd random question about how they should live their lives. Lads, how are you keeping?
Good, mate.
You doing well?
Yeah.
Good. Let's get into Old World. So all three of us, in fact, very passionately embraced Old World when it came out. There was lots of Old World chat. I even had a few games. I built all the Bretonians, like I do with lots of things in my life with the Brain Night Works. I got very excited and said I was going to play it every single day till the end of time.
Have you painted them yet?
Honestly, some of them are painted so badly.
All right.
I looked at them the other day and I thought I could sell them. And then I walked up to them and was like,
nah.
I could sell the ones in the box. I don't know if I could sell some of these. I gave it a try. We sort of I was really up for getting into Old World, and my lack of playing it has not been any reflection of how much I enjoyed the games. In fact, some of those early games that I had of Old World really reminded me of times gone by. I used to play a lot of fantasy, but I found it difficult to keep it up in amongst everything else that I'm doing. Whereas you two have cracked on. You've got a bunch of games in. You've been very enthused, and Michael, you've had the channel. Plug your channel.
Indeed, yeah. Return to the Old World. Been going for good couple of years now, actually.
Yeah, you've been grinding it out. You've been enjoying your YouTube life and your YouTube journey. Yeah,
it's been interesting. It's a great opportunity for me to sort of shout my ideas and nonsense out into the ether. So mate, do check it out.
I've been doing plenty of that as well. Shout nonsense into the ether. That's what it's all about. So you were playing Empire and still are playing Empire.
Yes. So Empire was the army. You may recall we did the Tale of Many Gamers.
I recall.
I was building Empire for that. That's been my main. I've switched now. I'm building up orcs and goblins, but Empire is my army that's actually table ready at the moment. That and dwarves, which I did before the game even existed. So that was interesting because I then had to rebase everything when they said we're moving 20 mil. So that was a faff.
Unlucky.
But yeah, still doing the Empire. They're one of the weakest factions in the game, so that makes it every game a bit of an interesting experience. I think you're with the Warriors still, aren't you, Tim?
Yeah, I'm doing basically all Nurgle Warriors of Chaos. I don't think I'm going to do a second army anytime soon. I'm doing
a lot of sweat and tears into that army.
Yeah, I put like 100 hours into building a hell cannon before the rules came out, and all it does is you roll a 1 and you give your opponent 200 points because it explodes. But I love my army. It's very off meta. It's got a big block of infantry, which is bad. It doesn't have a dragon, so it's bad. But I love it.
It looks great. It's like the painting is so nice on it. Anytime I compliment the painting, you're like, it's not that difficult. I'm like, this is difficult. You're so modest. Your Marine Army wins awards, and you're like, listen, I mean, it's really,
it's easy, mate.
And then you explain how
anyone
you did
can
it, and
do
I'm like, it's not just using contrast paint. So it's
yeah,
not easy at all.
Every step is easy. There's a lot of steps. That's,
okay,
yeah.
So we're going to talk about the state of the game, where it's at.
Yep.
Like some reflections on the gameplay, rules, and design. A bit of a dive into what you think is not going so well. Not in a negative, game's rubbish sort of way, but like there are a few areas that, like, well, as with any
rubbish,
game, could be brushed a bit. It's awful.
Yeah,
Show's over. Thanks for watching. No. I didn't introduce Nick either. Nick's produced. Sorry, Nick.
Hello.
That's rude of me. There we go. Thanks, Nick.
I'm here. Sorry. Just trying to keep quiet.
Hello. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it, Nick. And then we're going to be comparing Warhammer, the Old World, and Hobgoblin.
Yes.
Which sounds interesting.
I'm going to rant. I'm enthused about
Tim's
Hobgoblin.
going to go on a power rant.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to talk about like what's looking ahead for Old World next 6 to 12 months. I mean, they only release one army every 12 months, so surely that's not that much happening. You never know.
Yeah.
Right, state of the game then. So where do you both feel that it's at? Honest reflections on where the meta is at. Where's Old World at the moment?
Well, before I talk about the meta, I do want to say, like, people are playing it. I feel like it's not going to get forgotten anytime soon. It seems more popular than, say, Horus Heresy. In some places, it's
Yeah.
even more popular than AOS. Not in the whole country, but a few local metas are seeing more of it. So I think they're going to keep supporting it for a few more years. So that's
Does that
good.
feel like a reasonable place for where it should be at? Because I think in my head I overhyped it a bit, and I was like,
40k killer.
Yeah, I was going around saying to people like, honestly, trust me, all these people are going to come out of the woodwork. 'Cause I think a lot of us that got into Old World or into Old World have that like legacy of playing fantasy.
Yeah.
And it was like a bit of a vengeance project almost. It was like, we'll show you, you get rid of Warhammer Fantasy, watch this, and like all got into it and bought loads of stuff.
Yeah, there was loads of hype, and I remember I was on one of the the announcements from Games Workshop on their Twitch channel, and the chat was just going bonkers through the whole everything.
Yeah.
They were talking about 40k, whatever it was, people going bonkers about Old World, and there was loads of groups appearing on Facebook locally. All of that's gone quite quiet now, so I think there's that initial surge has sort of dropped off to a smaller sort of hardcore. But yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a huge nostalgia element to Warhammer the Old World.
Yeah,
especially with the kits, because the kits and the models they've brought out, they still look great.
mostly
After all these years.
Yeah.
What's on the edge?
So
Something look awful. I thought the Bretonians looked min.
like they released the Chaos Marauders, right?
Yeah.
And then along the same time they were doing the new AOS Marauders, and they're like 1,000 times better.
Yeah, that's probably going to have Slaves to Darkness in it on AOS.
Yeah.
Just look
They
ridiculous.
look really good.
But I think like partly the hype died down because no one could buy any models.
Yeah, there
for
was
so
that.
long, and half the people's armies aren't. When it first came out, every tournament organizer was like, "We're going to support the legacy factions forever. Don't worry about it." And already people are starting to like
this isn't getting to the point.
yeah, because this is coming around to the meta. Then we are at the point where it would be nice to have a little balance update, because some factions like your poor Empire are struggling, and Bretonians win most tournaments. Not, I don't know how. Like
They do very well.
they're winning a lot of
there's
tournaments.
vampire count.
Yeah, there's
Very
very
a bit further to even.
So we're
I was joking.
just shout. It's fine. We'd love to see some balance updates for like external balance. And if you're a TO, you're thinking, well, if that's coming, half the armies are going to get balanced against each other and the other half aren't. Do I want to be supporting the half that aren't when they could be supremely overpowered or underpowered?
So, like, general reflection so far, then there's a hardcore that's still playing the game, and it's going well. Like, it's certainly not dropped off a cliff, disappeared,
No,
like
not
some
at all.
other hyped up games have been. Not that the hype wasn't justified with Old World, but there was a lot of hype. I agree with both of you that, like, my feeling from the outside, and having played it a bit, was that initial hype wasn't capitalised enough by the design team at Games Workshop. And it was kind of like I went down to Warhammer World with Rob on the launch, and we saw the dwarfs, and it was ages before they even came out. Like, we were like, oh, look, there's the dwarfs, they'll be out soon in a few weeks.
Didn't the Orcs came out before them in the end, didn't they, as well? So.
Yeah. Orcs came up from, and it was just months and months and months of waiting. And I think you've got to keep that supply up, haven't you, to keep the excitement good. How's that sort of evolved? Has it got any quicker, or is it still...
It's got a little quicker, and also the new releases are actually getting new models, like not just... They got the bargain bin Bretonian Lord that everyone hated, but I actually quite like that.
So the guy on the horse?
No, he's a lord on foot, and he's got a really like hand sculpted smushed face like this. Someone clip that. So like at first you were getting new, but actually just like models they never released back in the day, and now you're getting actually new models, and they're good. So it feels like Games Workshop didn't expect it to be as popular and weren't prepared to like put things in production, and so they're slowly ramping that up.
Yeah, and I think that was what happened, wasn't it, behind the scenes? Because like the GW and the design team and the manufacturing team, they work so far ahead that when it comes out, they're like, there's a big hype. They're like, well, it is what it is. We can only print so many models. We've only got. I know they're opening another
factory
out there, which I imagine will speed up the production of everything
in a few years.
But it's kind of nestled in that maybe above Horus Heresy, and in some areas above AOS ish.
But that
as
was
a
like
game.
for me a big part of the excitement. It's like great, there's no models, I can use whatever I want.
Yeah,
Instead
a bit more
of-
flexibility.
Yeah. Instead of being like, I have to use these official kits for these official boys.
I would say one of the, and I fully agree. I agree. I don't think they really understood how many people wanted to buy into this, so missed the boat a little bit. But there's been timing issues since then as well. So I think one of the best examples when Warriors of Chaos came out last summer, that was quite quickly followed by, well, that's it for this year. We'll see you in 2025. And I mean, I got challenged on this on comments in one of my videos. It was like, oh, it's a bit of a rat. It's like, well, it's August, and then nothing until January.
Whereas 40K's like, tomorrow there's a new model, and then on Saturday there's a new model. I'm like,
I think 40K has problems the other way in that there's so many releases, and it's one of the reasons I stopped buying into 40K and sort of fell out of love with it. Is the game changes every week, and you just can't keep up with it. It's one of the reasons I didn't like War Machine as well, actually, from back in the day when I gave that a go.
he said
I
didn't say the W word.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody drink now.
Yeah, sure.
But it was all about, when I tried it out, the group I was in, it seemed to be all about gotchas, and unless you were really invested in the game and keeping on track of every combination known to man, it became a real struggle. So 40K the same, whereas Warhammer the Old World event actually is probably, if anything, moving a little too slowly, given there's some, as Tim was saying, some now well-versed issues where people know things need to be tweaked a little bit, so we could do with that balanced data sheet.
How are events managing that then? Because there is like a decent competitive scene.
It's
a lot of people playing events and so on.
Interesting. So I think we're starting at the first few, most of the tournaments that I saw floating around last year, so if it's anything different, was very much out the book, because the game was so new. No one really knew exactly what buttons to press, what levers to move, things like that. We're starting to see that now with people starting to introduce some homebrew scenarios. We're starting to see comp packs. And I don't know whether this is just Mr. Angry being the loudest voice on the internet.
Who's Mr. Angry?
But when I've seen some comments around...
There's a guy called Mr. Angry?
No, just as a representative.
Just
as a hypothetical Mr. Angry.
No, it's somebody, it's his rival, he can't say his name. He'll come through the door.
So there's a 2-day Warhammer Old World tournament coming to Brighton in summer. Umming and ahhing about it. It's got a comp pack, and we might end up talking about that later. We're talking about it in the preamble to this. But because it's got a comp pack, there's people going on the sort of event page going, well, it's not Warhammer because it's not out the book. It's not the rules as written. You've changed it, so I'm not going because it's not the game. It's a new game.
Oh, I'd like
Let's talk about it now. Let's talk about it now because it does sit within like the state of it.
So it's a very different sort of takes on, are you a slave to Games Workshop's
How
rule?
big is the comp though? Like how much have they changed? Is it
hardly
just
anything? It's like they've just said you've got to have 4 banners in your list and a general to have a legal army. That's it, really.
That's not a wild comp, is it? Because most units have a banner. Why what's... Is that for people taking monsters or something? What's the vision there?
It's to stop you building like 1,000 points in 2 dragons.
Oh, right, okay. Like, that's quite oppressive.
Yeah, it is very oppressive.
Do you play that list, Michael?
No.
The smile on your face anyway. You're like, it's oppressive, all right.
To be honest, I think I've only come up against 1 dragon, and then I have a double flyer list in the form of vampire cats.
Yeah, that's the thing. We know the meta's broken. We know dragons are too strong, infantry's too weak, and Bretts are too strong. Yeah. But at events, mostly people are running relatively balanced lists because it's like, I wanted to play the game where you have some ranked up boys.
Yeah, you want
so I brought my ranked up boys. Yeah. Like, we're not at the point where every tournament has someone or a handful of people who've got really tuned lists.
Yeah. Me and Nick are telepathic. Go on then. I can sense it.
We have a couple of things from chat. Firstly, happy birthday, Tim, from Ham Sandwich.
Thanks, Tom.
It's your birthday today.
See you tomorrow. Yeah, it is. No, sorry.
What?
No,
Tomorrow?
no. My birthday's tomorrow. I'll see Tom on Saturday.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, well, you
Many
should
happy
tell me
returns.
And,
happy birthday, mate.
Liam Jordan's actually said
Uh-oh.
that event is a little crazy. It's got way more than you've said.
Oh, is it? All right.
What, on the
Apparently
comp?
so.
Get Liam,
Get
put it in
Liam
the
to
chat.
shout it out, yeah.
Put what it is in the chat.
Ginger Steve's already asked him. I'm waiting for him to reply.
All right, yeah,
so
Liam, let us know.
I'll give
Yeah,
you
there
updates.
are some
Hi,
comp
Liam. Good to see you, my
restrictions, so
friends.
you can't have like triple rare and stuff. You
Oh,
can- I
right,
think
okay.
there's like limited to double, but I don't think it massively takes away from the Bretonian list of
No.
the RAF, 2 units of Peg Knights, because you can probably
Yeah.
build.
Yeah.
You can
You can
build in
still
the stuff
build
to
that.
make it legal around
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
that's arguably the best unit in
Well,
the game.
Liam will chip in here as well, because we know Liam plays a lot of
Yeah.
he's hitting the
Oh,
top.
Liam knows
Oh, yeah,
way
he
more
knows
than
more
me.
than we
Yeah.
do,
He
yeah.
doesn't on the comp. He's doing a lot of comp.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. Maybe Liam can give some insight. What percentage of, don't have to be exact. It does actually, Liam. What percentage of tournaments are doing comp?
I don't know.
Because that's
Don't know.
interesting. Do you remember Fantasy? Fantasy got to a point where like everything had to be comp because it was absolutely wild.
Yeah.
And there was so many lists that were like, yeah, that just auto win. So every single tournament eventually was rolling comp. But I got the vibe when I was at the beginning of Old World that it was kind of like, yeah, you can comp and it does take the edge off things. But Liam's point, what Liam had talked about with us on the show before, was that it's almost like a gentlemanly culture that you could. Gentleman is maybe the wrong
Yeah.
word. I'm being loose with my language there, but like you kind of like want an agreement at the table of like, oh come on, don't take that, mate.
Yeah.
And Liam talked about when someone does play those lists, the screamer list, right? Is that still a problem?
Yeah,
Yeah.
You just sit in the corner. You just be like, do you know what, you're going to move to me for 3 turns, and I'll try and kill a bit just to give me a chance of winning. But best case scenario, you're getting a draw. So it was that.
Liam has come back with very little comp bar rule of 3/6 in most events. 3 or
Right, that's classic Liam. I don't understand anything.
So
he said
I think
to
what
that.
he's talking about there is you can only have 6 units of the same thing from your core.
I didn't know that. Thanks.
And then 3 units of the same type in your other categories, so special rare characters. But
That was people were doing that comp week 1 though. Like the
yeah,
game
Luke
came.
was on about doing that.
Yeah, the game was
checking
out,
the
and
edge
people
off.
were like, I think we should probably limit it to 3 because otherwise you get 6 gyrocopters or whatever.
yeah, he said rule of 6 for core, 3 from special.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not crazy. It's nothing like, I don't know if you remember Swedish comp. Which was
Swedish comp. What's that?
So back in the
Sounds rude, honestly.
back in the
TV.
fantasy
Yeah, it
I
sounds
wouldn't
like
mind a bit of
something
that.
also take place on
back
a
in the
couch.
fantasy days, there was
That's really what I called this on the show. Welcome to the Epic Flail casting couch. And like, I can say it now. So 5 minutes in. We're 5 minutes in, so the algorithm is like,
doesn't care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the students
so
do though. So everybody. Sorry, carry on.
the club I used to go to in London at the time, most of the games we played were South Coast
Wait,
comp.
what's this? Fantasy.
Fantasy.
fantasy,
So
right?
this is back in 8th edition
Yeah.
of Fantasy. There were the other big comp system used by a lot of tournaments at the time was Swedish comp, where it was a really confusing way of you buying certain units to get points back and stuff. So you diving into the weaker stuff
Oh,
to
man,
give you
yeah,
the
I'm
opportunity
tapped
to
out
buy.
already, that sounds-
Never really got into it myself, but yeah, comp was the standard. So South Coast GT comp was the comp that we tended to use the most, and a lot of tournaments use that. But yeah, 8th got a little bit wild in its approach to life.
So,
Which
so
is a
there's
shame,
there's some bumps in the road with it, but has it lived up to your expectations? As a game, as an experience at the table.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. It's definitely ticked the nostalgia boxes. Other things that could be improved about it, absolutely. I think that's true of every game to a certain extent. You're never going to get the perfect game that everyone likes. But yeah, it's a fun game. A couple of tweaks probably needed.
Like most games,
but-
there's
yeah.
rarely a game that
Yeah.
you're like, oh, do you know what?
Yeah,
Don't need a tweak. Don't need a little
absolutely.
tickle.
But yeah, I think it's good fun. And that social contract you were talking about earlier, it seems most people, and I think because it's a lot of people returning from a game that died 8, 9, 10 years ago now, you've got a little bit of an older crowd as well, so that sort of like rush of enthusiasm has probably died down a bit, and it's more like, I get to play once every blue moon. I just want to push some toy soldiers around with my mates. A game that's over in 30 minutes is no good to either of us. So
Yeah.
let's just be sensible.
If you build a balanced-ish list, a list that looks like an army, and play it against your mate, it plays exactly how you want it to. It's good.
Nothing beats rank and file, does it? Go on,
Yeah.
go on, Nick. Telepathic Nick.
We have I'm not going to say new member, he's been a member for 8 months. Ginger Steve's just renewed. And
Ginger Steve.
he also says, I don't think I've ever seen a comp that hurts the breadths. I think the best way to do comp is to make the missions different, so you need a banner to take objectives, etc. Make infantry great again.
I think that's a
Appreciate it,
good
mate.
idea. Yeah,
Appreciate it.
That's pretty much spot on, really. Just mixing up the scenarios a little bit so it's not fundamentally kill more.
Yeah.
What are the
And they-
scenarios? Have they got scenarios that are...
People don't the events don't tend to run very varied missions, so it's usually just
Kill
get
more.
more kill points or get more kill points on a narrower board.
Yeah.
On a what, narrower board?
Narrower, yeah, different deployment shapes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
deployment.
But you could have like hold the middle or hold the edges or things like that, but that's not super common in events yet. But that's starting to change. When we nearly had a game tonight instead of this podcast, and we were gonna test out a mission from a tournament that happened like a month ago.
Yeah, the Welsh Open, I think.
Yeah, and their pack's really interesting because I was looking at like, right, what mission are we going to play and how do I build a list that's good at that? Like basically game it so I could win on stream. And then and then I'm like, well, it's interesting because if you build a list that's really good at one mission, it's going to be bad at another. And I think that's a sign of a good pack because you would really have to build quite a balanced list.
Yeah, because I think we're talking about the scenario 1 and scenario 2 from that pack. Scenario 1, big block of Chaos Warriors. Scenario 1 is basically a big punch up in the middle, and you want the biggest unit from turn 3 onwards in the middle, and nothing else really matters apart from having the big unit in the middle. So big block of Chaos Warriors, really hard to get rid of, really good for you. Then there was another one which involved, I think, capturing bits of loot and getting it off the table. Where if you've got MSU, like cavalry flying around, really bad for you, quite good for me. So, yeah, to do well in that tournament where you've got all these bonkers missions that are really diverse, you've got to have something that's actually good at a little bit good at everything. So there's definitely some different list building challenges on that.
Yeah.
Who is struggling, like army-wise, where it's kind of we don't have to do like a really detailed ranking, but give me a general vibe of the meta and armies.
Empire's not doing great. Dwarves aren't doing great.
Unless you're...
Why?
Unless you're the gun line.
Why do they not do great?
Because they can't take a dragon. Basically.
They ain't got no dragons.
So, dwarves do very well in the right hand. So there's a guy out there whose name escapes me. He's got a YouTube channel.
I know who you mean, but I can't remember his name.
He's won a lot of tournaments, and I think Royal Clan, the Army of Infamy, Royal Clan, whatever it was called, has done really, really well in the rankings, and I think that's purely because this one guy keeps winning.
Okay,
so it's an infantry-based army. Infantry's not that strong. They've got some good rules combos that if you really know how to use them, you can do well with it, but generally struggle. I think Skaven are really weak. They're one of the armies of legend, so we're never going to see any more support
and
from
lizard
them.
men
And lizard men
and ogres. They'll just always be bad, which is sad.
There's just nothing else coming their way.
Well, I mean, if the game
Or is there?
Yeah, we can hope that if the game keeps selling and people keep playing it, they'll just bring those armies back.
Maybe.
Was that a telepathic nod, Nick?
It was a telepathic nod in the form of an actual nod. Is it Richie from Derby After Dark?
Yes.
The Team England captain?
Yes.
There you go.
Him.
That wasn't me, that was Ginger Steve.
Yeah.
I know nothing.
What, is the WTC kicking off for it?
I don't know. All I know is this guy keeps winning events at a canter with dwarves.
Yeah.
Who smashed it then? So if you've got like dwarves, ogres, lizard men, some of those legend
You've got
factions, Empire.
Brett's
who's
are
killing
definitely up at the top. So we talked about the RAF list, which
it?
is either the Exiles list, which then comes supported by double cannon as well.
Yeah, I think I've got that list
or the
not built,
general composition version of it. Both really strong. The Scream list for Vampire Counts is really
That's still
strong. And as much as I know Liam talks about camp in the corner and it's a draw kind of thing, when I've faced versions of that list, it's actually also pretty quick. So it gets across the board and then starts screaming you. So it's difficult to
And you just
not
go off the
engage
board.
it.
Yeah. Also, if you like took a train or drove for a 2-day event, maybe you got a hotel and one of your games, you have to just stand in a corner and not roll any dice. You're just not going to do it. Well, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to charge up the middle and lose because
you
at
wanna
least
roll
I get
dice?
to
You wanna
move some
play? You
models
wanna
then.
play?
Yeah.
So who else? What's he chuckling at?
Another one from Ginger Steve. Richie is lovely, and he gives you soothing words as he spanks your army off the table.
Oh God.
Liam's also come back with. Liam's playing WoW at the minute, so he's
Oh.
doing this in between
Oh,
killing
wow.
things, I guess.
Multitasking.
He said Brett's/TK/WOC-ish are the pretty clear top tier as it stands.
Yeah, Warriors of Chaos are good. I can't complain. I just don't have
Yeah.
any dragons in my list. So
Yeah.
You got a hell cannon, mate.
I've got a Hell Cannon.
Primed
Yeah.
to just blow up.
Yeah.
I
And
think you went on stream when that happened. Did you play stream?
Yeah,
game?
turn
Just
one,
like-
explode. And that was against the
I was like,
stream
we've got
list.
we've got Tim on the stream
Yeah.
with his old one, and just
He's
like
200
the hell
points
cannon, bang. Well, that's dead. The other guy's winning.
Oh, it makes me laugh though. I don't mind.
It's a bit of fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the best thing about the game that keeps you engaged? What's kept you sort of playing and engaged in the game, the hobby?
Honestly, list building is so much more fun than 40k and AOS. Like, you can give your guy a hat or a magic carpet or a thing that turns an enemy wizard into a frog. Like, so there's narrative fun, but then also like, oh, I've got a 65-point sword or a 45-point sword, or I could buy a 15-point shield. I love that. If we get around to Hobgoblin, that's all list
Yeah, we'll
building.
get to the hobgoblins.
But like 40k, there's no choices to make, and so these games, most of the enjoyment of a miniatures game is spent at home on your own, like either painting or list building, and then maybe you get a game once a week if you're lucky. So that process needs to be enjoyable, and the more you can tweak the little numbers, the better. So I build a lot more lists than I play games.
I think for me, actually, and this might be a little bit controversial,
Don't do it. Don't get it out. You fret.
That it's not-
Okay, fair. Sorry. Oh, something else. Okay.
It's-
All right.
it's actually probably not the game itself, and I fully agree with everything you just said to me, but it's for me, I think it's not necessarily it's the game itself, it's the world that it's set in. So we're looking at a game which, all right, they had the pause between fantasy disappearing and now with old world, but you've got best part of 40 years worth of narrative, of people writing stories, and then you throw in Warhammer fantasy roleplay games, of which there's been 3-4 editions and a new game coming out soon. Yeah, I used to play that at university. And you're constantly intertwining your own stories, and that's what I love about Warhammer. There's enough there to get you into it, but there's enough left open that you can almost create your own adventure.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things when I'm sat there at the moment, working my way through a block of 40 Night Goblin archers, which is painful. But
It's just cloaks, mate.
having already done
Painting's easy.
yeah, I've already done I've already done a block of 30 plus characters and stuff out of the box. I'm now on my second box of 40 Night Goblin archers. But while I'm painting that, actually what I'm thinking about is what's the story behind this unit. So I've got as far as, okay, so I've got these 2 units of Night Goblins. I don't want them to, like, oh, actually, yeah. So, because you've got to have your character tax for Night Goblins. You have to have a Night Goblin character to take a Night Goblin unit, which you want because fanatics are great and they can only come out of Night Goblins. So, okay, so I really want 2 wizards. Well, actually, if I have 2 wizards at the same levels, it's almost like they're rivals and they can't sort of about equal size, and then the orcs take them over. And I've kind of got all these stories whirring around in my head while I'm painting them, and it just makes the narrative is huge for me.
I think these things link together. Like the story you come up with your little for your little goblin wizard is enhanced if it has this particular item, right?
Yeah.
He's got a flying carpet. That's hilarious, right?
It's for sure like the best IP. I mean, 40k. I do like the 40k IP, but there's bits of the 40k universe, as you'll see, where I'm just constantly perplexed by. I think that's so stupid. Orcs, just some of the stuff where you're like, that's so ridiculous. I know fantasy's
I don't
got
want any
that.
orc bashing on this.
No, okay, fine. All right,
No,
fine.
none of it.
Until next week.
Yeah.
But and fantasy obviously has some of that like satirical and just madness in it. But I've always felt that was the world I connected with the most. I much preferred the like rank and file, big battles, wizard. I always preferred that. I think because of Warhammer Fantasy Battle role play. Yeah, I used to play a lot of that, and we just mess around and just let our imaginations go wild. And but I think our sort of generation of gamers, not necessarily in age, but in choice of games we played, that's that like loyalty kicking back in a way, isn't it? Because it painted that universe so well, and that's why so many people were annoyed when they just went meh.
Yeah, it's got humour in it as well, this setting. Like Blood Bowl and Old World are the only Games Workshop products with anything remotely funny in them. Right.
Yeah. Blood Bowls.
What a piece.
That's good fun.
Like it's in the rules writing, it's in the like item descriptions. Yeah. It's in, even the FAQs are funny. Yeah. Where they like tease you for asking a stupid question. Like
it's got that like
But actually you look back at the games of that era, so the 90s really, Gorka Morka, Necromunda, the old Blood Bowl editions, all of it. There's humour interwoven through all of it.
God, Gorka Morka. Someone was chatting about Gorka Morka recently. Were you guys chatting about
Yeah,
Gorka
so
Morka?
we're...
Me and Chris are playing it.
Yeah, we're going to do a campaign at Club.
Get involved.
What a game.
I've got loads of orcs.
Oh mate, I'd love a game of Gorka Morka.
Yeah, all right.
I remember when it came out, I was just like, "This is mad."
That was my jam.
I just don't think that I like orcs.
Yeah. Well, it's all in an orcs only setting. You can kind of suspend your disbelief, right?
It's a great game. It's just fun. That is pure chaos.
Like, it is.
Just
ridiculous absolutely. Game. So we're going to do I think we're doing a campaign at some point down the club this year.
Oh, fun, nice.
So we're trying to get a start off date. 40k leagues keep taking the time away, which is a bit of a shame. But we definitely want to do some Gorka Morka.
Stupid game.
I'll definitely. I think if we do that, I'll definitely be covering it as well. So I think that'll be a lot of fun.
How does reflecting on like previous editions, how does this compare to fantasy? Now you've both got a bunch of games in. How does it compare to the old Warhammer Fantasy Battles?
This is over to you because I haven't played fantasy since I was a kid.
Fair enough,
like 5th edition.
So it's very different. So I started off, I think it was 4th ed, which was the first army box set. This is when I was small.
Is that when Bretonnians came out?
No,
it
was before that.
Release?
It was High Elves and Goblins.
Oh, I
5th edition, I think, was the one you're thinking.
The archers like that, the High Elf archers that were all just the same pose.
Those.
Yeah.
So I had that when I was a little kid. I had hours of fun playing. I'd never played it according to the rules because when you're a kid, you don't.
Yeah. You just roll dice.
Just faffed and pushed around. Playing properly when I came back, did the usual thing. I stopped playing when then came back from uni and picked it up again. That was, I think, back end of 6th into 7th edition. So really, I had proper experience of 6th, 7th, 8th. The game changed so much between editions. So in the earlier days, it was your Hero Hammer era. So it was about big choppy blokes on big monsters and very powerful wizards. And I remember playing games using what was called the Battle Master supplement. So you had tons of cards for all your spells and stuff. And I think you drew cards and that determined how much power you had to cast stuff. But I had a couple of games with that where we were using wizards properly. And it felt very much, it was a bit of a rush of the whack-a-mole thing. If you took out your opponent's wizard, you could then do horrible things and they could do nothing about it. So characters were really powerful. Then we kind of went into the world where cavalry was really strong because at the time there was no pre-measuring. So your charge was double your movement value. So you got into some quite clever games where everyone knew you deployed 12 inches on, so you deploy like 11 inches on to try and bait that charge. Someone would miss by an inch and then you could counter all this sort of stuff. But because cavalry had a longer range than infantry, cavalry did really well. And like the current game...
Wait, hang on. Could you... I remember when it was like that, but I was very young. Well, a lot younger. And could you, once someone had deployed, could you then go and check how far they deployed?
No, there's no pre-measuring.
So it's literally like if you miss and deploy, like how far you deployed, you missed it.
Yeah.
You could be such an arsehole, couldn't you?
Yeah.
You could be like, sorry, mate, looks like you missed me deploy. I'm not going to tell you. I don't even know.
No pre-measuring is done. It used to be guess range weapons in 40k, and you would just go, well, I'll shoot this thing into them. Oh, I better check if I'm in range. Oh, I am. And then, oh, now I'm going to guess 24 inches.
Yes,
like,
that's so stupid.
it's dumb.
But yeah, I still have a bit of a hangover actually from those days. So
Guess range times.
Guess range times. Yes, I can't say that quickly, can I?
The end times and the guess range.
When I'm shooting with cannon or whatever with my Empire army, I always want to start with my cannon because it used to be in the rules that you fired guess range weapons before any other weapon.
Oh, right.
So you had to you fired all your artillery, and then you could fire your bows where you have to measure the range if you were in range.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a thing. Whoever charged struck first. So cavalry would go in, they'd strike first. They'd kill the front rank of whatever they hit, probably. So you got no attacks back if you were infantry. So infantry struggled in the same way as it's struggling now.
What's that called? Step up.
Yeah, so
That's step up in it.
Step
There's
up's
no
when you
step
do
up.
get,
yeah, so that appeared as a rule in 8th edition. So basically, as long as there was some model standing in the front rank, you'd get to fight because people stepped into the fighting rank and fought.
Yeah.
Which made 8th edition about gigantic units of infantry. And
sounds cool.
Yeah, but I think my Empire army I was running at the time had 2 units of 50 halberdiers.
I can't take that seriously.
You then-
2 units of 50. It's like 2 dinner plates. of
Absolutely,
units.
10 wide, 5 deep,
It's like I can do the
rolling.
maths, Michael, don't we?
And the front and second ranks fought, so you were getting like 20 attacks, and you'd be rolling handfuls of dice.
That does sound
Magic was all about the doom spell. So you rolled up to 6 dice to cast a spell. So you got all your power dice. You rolled the biggest spell you had. You rolled 6 dice. You looked for a double 6, which meant your opponent couldn't dispel it. And you had spells that basically went that unit there, take it off.
Yeah, there's a few. I remember a few just deleting it.
It was just.
Is
It
he
was
selling
got
you to?
daft.
Is he making you feel like actually it's in a good place here? in
That's
some of
why
these
comp
stories?
came so massive. And there were issues as well with people going to events. I remember the stories around loaded dice. For
Toilet
spell
dice.
Really? There's a lot of bog dice.
There was
people
bog dice because you could roll a spell and it's like the most important unit in your army, take it off.
Yeah,
That's making Old World seem pretty good.
Yeah.
8th edition was a bit of a mess, to be honest.
I wouldn't mind Step Up though.
Yeah, it's
What
going.
do you think that might help with it? Yeah, you guys were saying infantry.
Well, it's a solution. It's a quick, dirty solution, but it's
one of the things I wanted to ask was like cavalry, infantry, war machines, monsters. Are they kind of well? And that's war machines, not war machine, by the way. Are they all well balanced?
No.
What? How would you sort of tier that? What's
Well,
monsters on
some
top?
armies have very good cavalry, but most armies, and very few armies have good infantry. Most armies that have a dragon, it's their best unit. Excepting potentially their wizards. But and then obviously the hell cannon's busted. You take a lot of artillery. Are they useful?
I do, yeah. I think the most recent FAQ thing that dropped at the start of the year does hamper.
Well, they do. You can't
artillery.
bounce it over a wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, over a hill. Which makes loads of sense because you fire a cannonball into a hill, it's going to stop. The ball's not going to miraculously bounce over the hill, so it makes tons and tons of sense. But what it does do is you've got a hill placed like in the middle of the board. It basically casts a whole this massive shadow, which then your very expensive artillery can't touch.
How do you feel about that as an Empire player?
As an Empire player, I kind of feel, on one hand, it's like, oh, do I really want all these great cannon, which were so useful and they've done so much work for me? But on the other hand, it's like, if I've got troops on the back of a hill, which is historically what people used to, like, Wellington was famous for this, deploying Battle of Waterloo behind the ridge line. You guys are there and like they lay down, and then the artillery can't really touch them. So it's so much more realistic than these laser-sighted cannonballs, which are it's just silly. So yeah, on one hand it hurts because it hurts an army that's already struggling. and one of the few toys they've got, and with the grand, what's it called, Grand Skull or whatever it is, tournament they do at Warhammer World, where they're toning down the number of wizards you can have. The strong lists only have 1 or 2 wizards anyway. It's the weakest factions that rely on the magic, that rely on the cannons, that are being hurt by all of this. So it does feel as though they're targeting the wrong composition when they're toning stuff down. So there's a bit more balanced work to be done.
But it's easy to imagine a mission pack for a tournament where monsters, heavy cavalry, light cavalry are all good. And characters and artillery. It's hard to imagine a comp pack that gives you good infantry. Yeah. Like foot-slog infantry just...
Although I do think the idea that came out in chat earlier actually is a really good idea, where you're using infantry with banners because you've got to take and hold objectives. I think that might actually be the answer, is in the scenario writing.
But you would take light cavalry with banners if you could.
You would.
You'd only take infantry if you couldn't.
If you're saying it's infantry that need to take
objectives.
It
have to be infantry.
Has to be, if you say it has to be infantry. All right, that completely nerfs Bretonia, but oh dear, never mind. They've had their moment in the sun. But yeah, more seriously, they've got some very good infantry options. Do you remember your men at arms? They just
just like absolute chump boys that just won't run away.
Yeah, so a couple of units of those,
absolute
and
idiots.
you're laughing. Yeah. So it can be done.
I struggle to imagine how it's going to be balanced without a scenario like that. Surely you need a scenario to like hinge balance on, otherwise it's just like the only measurable is killiness. It's like how killy and tanky is this versus, its manoeuvrability, or maybe a specific part of the scoring element that only allows it to score. Like you said, if only infantry can score, great, you've just taken your 2 dragons, but you won't get any points. So you're killing my army, but I just got you scoring 0. So that kind of thing seems a sensible way to balance it. What's the sort of best game you've had, or like the most cinematic? It's a very cinematic game, isn't it? Tell me your hell cannon blowing up a few times is very on brand.
Every time a hell cannon explodes is the best game I've ever had.
Honest.
Yeah. I think my favourite moment was, because I've built a big block of Nurgle warriors, and then I put a wizard in there to give them extra attacks and extra armor penetration and stuff like that. It's not that good, but I had a game where that block killed a dragon, and I was very happy about that. That just felt like...
Well done, boys.
Yeah, chopping its legs off. Yeah.
All their past failings have been redeemed when you're like, yes.
No, it is a good block. Like, it's just not as good.
It's really hard to kill it. Is it -1 to hit? No, 6s.
You reroll successful 6s.
Which when you're hitting on 4s is quite annoying.
And you're fighting last, because I've given the wizard a buff.
Oh, right, nice.
So you charge into it, they chop at you, and so you don't get many attacks back. There's a squeaking coming from over there.
It's the
chair. He was communicating telepathically, now he's communicating via the power of squeaks. It's all right, mate, you squeak away, I'm just checking you're all right. We've kind of talked about some of the, I guess, weaknesses or frustrations with it, but we've done it with an element of sensible optimism. They're not things that can't be overcome.
No,
and they're not things that don't prevent fun engagement in the game. This is not like a doom slaying with it or anything. But like, it's kind of I'm phrasing it in a bit of a leading way. But it sounds like there is a great deal of hope and optimism for the future of where the game's going to go. What do you kind of want to see? Do you think it's got a long-term value as a specialist GW game? You don't get any sense or signs that like it's going to live a bit of a shelf life and they're going to give up with it?
No, I feel like it feels like they're keying up for a new army release, right?
Yeah. So there's the there is a new army coming down, and they've not said who it's going to be yet. The internet investigators swear blind it's going to be Cathay, which will be really interesting. We've never had a Cathayan army. And I don't know how they would plug it in, because the game's all been very much, it's set in the old world and Border Princes, and anything outside of that's app scope. Cathay is, if the old world is Europe, Cathay is China. How on earth they bring them into an old world storyline, I've no idea.
Portal.
Who knows?
Portal.
Just keep it a portal open.
But
a wizard did it.
If it is Cathay, it's something completely new, which will be quite interesting.
Well, that's Total War, isn't it? It's Warhammer Total War.
Yeah, they're in Total War. But yeah, I'll be quite if that's what it turns out to be, and it does seem that that's the kind of the bookie's favourite, for want of a better expression.
Do you know what's
then
cool
be
about
that
that as an
interesting.
idea? New models, new sculpts, none of this
Yeah.
go back to basics sort of thing of like, oh, we've put these molds back in.
I do just want them to support the other armies, though.
The legacy armies.
Yeah, just put them in. Who cares?
Skulls and stuff.
Yeah.
Ginger Steve has actually said in Warhammer Total War, Cathay send trade caravans across the old world.
Mm.
There you go.
All right, so maybe they just
Maybe that's the angle.
if you hitch a ride and get a rumble going.
Yeah.
Tim, you were mentioning before off stream about Hobgoblin.
Yes.
And then we have a Hobgoblin area in the Discord that Luke created. What on earth is Hobgoblin?
What the hell is
Why are you pumped
Hobgoblin?
on- And how does it correlate to Old World?
All right, Hobgoblin is a miniatures game. Miniatures agnostic. They don't sell anything. It's just a rule book you can buy. It's made by Planet Smasher Games, which is Mike Hutchinson. So just one guy made it. It's a rank and flank game. And you can... Any miniatures you own that are vaguely fantasy, you can play in Hobgoblin. You get a movement tray. It doesn't have to have little holes in it for the bases. You could literally just cut a square out of some cereal packet and put the miniatures on it. You can play with them. And the reason that works is because there's no factions, there's no unit types. There's just... Well, the unit types are light infantry, ranged infantry, heavy infantry, light cavalry, etc. So you go... When you make a list, you go, right, this is a light infantry unit. And then you go, well, they've got javelins, so I want them to have some range, so you add the range keyword. And then you go, they've got shields, so they're a little bit tough, so I'll give them this toughness keyword. And then you go, oh, they're dwarves, so they're slow, so I'll give them the slow weakness. And all these things add and subtract from their points. So you can build anything you can imagine using these system of keywords, and then you can...
no factions, just like one mega list of units.
There's not even a list of units. There's just 9. There's just... Like I said, it's infantry or it's cavalry or it's monster or it's chariot, right? And then you design, if you want it to be a skeleton unit that crumbles easily, there's a weakness for that. If you want it to be like a Nurgle unit that's really hard to kill, there's a strength for that. And so you can build the flavor into your army however you like. So it solves balance, both internal and external balance, because you can make any list you like with any models.
Has it got points associated with all this, right?
Yeah, there's
So it's like
points.
a costing.
Yeah. And the game feels like the essence of Warhammer. You move things, you wheel them, you charge. Flanking is important. There are wizards that can do Gotchery type spells. But it plays in like 90 minutes and you can learn it in about 10.
Is it fantasy-esque?
Yeah,
like a movement rule system and like to hit and stuff like that?
it's quite different from Warhammer. There are no stats really, apart from how far you can move and what unit type you are. So whenever you make an attack, you
Still
just...
rolling dice, right?
Yeah.
Still a dice game.
It's still a dice game. When you make an attack, you just consult a chart. So it's like ranged infantry is good into light cavalry. And so it'll tell you what you need to hit. And then basically every unit rolls 10 dice, regardless of who it's fighting into. Yeah. And you see what you needed to hit, and that's how many wounds you do. And the thing that's genius about it is it's not quite alternating activations. It's not quite you go, I go. One player does all their movement, then the other player does all their movement. Then one player does all their combat, the other player does all their combat. And then the last phase is you remove any model that had taken enough wounds to die. So there's no alpha striking. There's no getting shot off the board turn 1 because, well, there's an extra rule to stop that. But mostly, like, even if something dies, you still get to fight with it that turn. And so it's like, just, it doesn't have any as many feel bads. I mean, I guess there's still potential for feel bads, especially in our first game. You draw these cards, which are like, they're similar to stratagems in 40k. Yeah. They let you do a special thing. Until you know what all those are, you can definitely get gotcha'd by them, and that could feel bad. But there's only 20 or so different ones, so...
You both played it?
Yeah, so I played against it. I actually did a video, quick plug, did go check it out. It's about 2 weeks ago.
I'll put it in the Discord.
So yeah, I did a video on looking at Hobgoblin, and I came into playing the game and sort of preparing my thoughts. I'm doing do a comparison Warhammer against Hobgoblin, and then sort of realised halfway through I was writing down my script for it. It's like, this doesn't work, because actually I don't think you can compare Hobgoblin to Warhammer, in that yes, they're both fantasy rank and flank games, but that's as far as it goes, because their design philosophy is so different. You're not comparing apples with apples. It's like saying, what do you prefer, tea or coffee? They're they're hot drinks, but they're very different. It's not like saying, what kind of coffee do you like? They're two different.
Yeah, I get the different systems. Tim, you were talking before the show about like maybe we've lost the gaming community, tabletop community sometimes loses a bit of the kind of like ethos of you can be flexible with the rules. You were kind of vocalizing that like maybe we've lost a bit of that.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like with we'd like a balance update for Old World, but also be careful what you wish for, because 40k, like you say, it's constantly changing. The way they approach balance is like, it's kind of frustrating. It just means if you were trying to like stay on top of the meta and have a good list, you basically every time they release a thing, you need to have 3 of something you didn't have 3 of before.
And then by the time you've built it, painted, assembled it, played it once, it's like changed it again. You're like, oh great, I've now got 3 of them.
I don't think that's I don't think that's very synergistic with playing a miniatures game.
It's like a computer game.
Great for a computer game. Yeah. Probably good for a collectible card game to have a meta that changes that much. Especially a living card game like Netrunner, where you own every card, so there's no like rarity. Yeah, what a game. There's no rarity chasing like there is in Magic the Gathering. But in a miniatures game, you spend tens, hundreds of hours building your force that you love, and then you can't take it because it's bad.
Yeah.
Nearly said a bad word then.
So
that's not good, and the game should not be designed like that. And Hobgoblin says play with your toys, because whatever toys you have, you can give them whatever rules you like. And I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. But I guess if it's a solo project, that kind of makes sense for them, because there's no miniatures range. You're just like, go out and use whatever and just have a bit of...
I mean, they have designed like a world with like places and races and stuff. Yeah. But it's more just to get your imagination going. You can just use anything. You could use Warhammer, you could use War Machine, you could even use like historical, like Napoleonic figures if you want.
Whatever you've got.
Yeah, anything, it'll work. Yeah.
Sounds like it could be a good like entry game into, if someone's like, what's tabletop miniatures and gaming? There's a system where it's like, this is actually just really easy to pick up. There's loads of variety in terms of, you don't need specific models, just like...
I think we all played Warhammer as kids and didn't play the rules properly, right?
Yeah. Oh mate, we
just absolutely.
It was like role playing.
Warhammer is a game for an adult who's committed to learning something very complicated, right?
Yeah.
If you were introducing, if someone was like, "Oh, that looks fun. I want to push toys around the table with you," Hobgoblin would be a good game to get them on, because it's so quick to learn.
To what a tabletop, because most people have, when you say to people, "What is Warhammer?" and you try and explain it, and you literally sound like you're insane.
Yeah.
You're like, it's a thing on models and the scenery and the stuff, and they're just like...
It's like Legos, but you have to roll dice.
Yeah. I've never tried that one.
I think perhaps one of the
Lego
things
with dice.
With that is, if you think about when Warhammer first appeared, admittedly, first edition was incredibly different because it was coming out of the role-play environment rather than the tabletop miniatures environment. But if you think about wargaming back in the 70s, 80s, and the sort of rules that existed then, hyper-realism was the trend. And I remember when I was a kid playing World War II naval game with my dad from this sort of tradition, and you're rolling on chart after chart after chart after chart to work out what happens. It's really complicated. You're constantly flicking through the rule book. And Warhammer, I think, because of it's a game from the early 80s, it's sort of come from people that started playing in those traditions. Whereas now, newer games that are a bit freer, it's different ethoses. I think for new games now, they are a little bit quicker, a little bit lighter. So
that's a really interesting observation. You think about like AOS spearheads, it's kind of like They just try to make it so you need as few, like there's, I don't mean this in a like a negative way, but as little effort as possible to get on the table and play in a game that makes sense. Whereas you think about like entry into old school fantasy, months and months and months and months of buying, building, painting, learning, and then play. You know, like so much to learn. Versus buy a spearhead, paint it up, get on the table. Done. Rules are streamlined, off you go. I guess that's the modern mind in it. That's what people expect from products now. Isn't it? Like
we've talked about 40k and Age of Sigmar. They don't feel like war games. They're like board games
40K
on a table.
For sure feels like
because it's not. We should have like with Old World. There's a tiny feeling that if you're good at Old World, you might have learnt something about commanding a real army, like not a real army with wizards, but you've learnt a little bit. But in 40k and Sigmar, you haven't. You've learnt how to stand a man in the corner so you can score a secondary.
And remember multiple mechanics at the same time. Like 40k now, I think is a series of mechanics.
Yeah,
like you're managing risk.
Stand an inch from the wall.
Yeah.
Be within. Ready to move within 9 of this and 6 of this.
Yeah. It's like about card recollection, and it's about fast maths around six-sided dice. And sure, I think 40k. And this isn't again people that are really good at 40k are really smart people. There's no doubt that it's a game you just pick up and can. Smash
for sure.
But like the concept of what I really liked about Old World, the games, is like the concept of like a flank. I've got to protect that flank. So you like strategically, and another thing I've always spent many. Great deal of time watching is like battles, historical you know, I love watching videos about reenacting famous battles. Old World has that feel, doesn't it? At the end of a game, you're like, oh, we had a battle, we had a proper scrap. This flank collapsed and this held, and that, you know. Whereas
and these human beings ran away because they were scared.
Yeah. It's got a story and a narrative, and you feel like you've watched a battle play out. Whereas 40k, so much. You're never like, that was a battle. Because like there's stuff everywhere. I mean, one thing's here and it's there, and you're picking up and moving it around.
Yeah. Oh, I rolled a 5 instead of a 4 on my charge, so I had to give you a heroic intervention. That's not. Oh, yeah.
It's actually probably one of the rules I really like about Warhammer: The Old World is the different outcomes of close combat. So it always used. Well, I say always. For many editions, it used to be really binary. 2 units had a fight, one side lost, and they either stood their ground and carried on fighting, or they legged it. Now, you might leg it, you might run but then immediately rally before the others can get to you, or you just get driven back. And actually that, I think, does open up a whole new world of narrative options where if you've got a centre line that slowly starts bowing away, actually your opponent pushing forward then can start exposing their flanks. As they can get driven in front of your army.
That's a great mechanic. I really like
it. It is good. The give ground is awesome. The way the board slowly moves across the battlefield is cool. It does introduce some gaminess, like where I fell back, rallied, and I turned into a line 30 wide. Not great.
What?
That's the drilled special rule, isn't it? Which is really super strong.
Because everyone gets to fight in the front ranks. You just reform.
In a huge line, and then absolutely... it's not very gentlemanly.
Yeah, it's not.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good rule. Though.
We're teasing 40k, but there are some silly things in Old World as well. There's that. There's
isn't the thing people could do with dogs?
Dogs, like so in marching column, so one wide loads deep. They've FAQ'd it so when you wheel, you measure the front movement. So imagine like the front moves like this, the back moves all the way over here. So you got dogs just spinning around the board. It's a bit silly.
Oh, there you go. Right, we have something from. There's a couple of bits. Something from Ginger Steve. He's just on a super chat for $9.99.
Thank you, Ginger Steve. You're a good man. We appreciate you, sir.
And his question is: so if they introduce Cathay and Dogs of War next year with maybe Dark Elves and Vampire Counts, now they have entirely new models in AOS. Do you think that invigorates the game plus scenarios, etc.?
I feel like scenarios would be huge.
Scenarios.
Would really. Of all those things, I feel like scenarios would really show itself.
I think just one new faction would invigorate the game hugely. Like having all of that would be awesome, but just one. Just one set of models where they're like, you can't use these in other game systems. That would be cool. People would like.
Do you think it get Warhammer Total War players, or do you think they've already been captured? I feel like the average Total War player played fantasy. Like, I love Warhammer Total War.
I think that had the game released to its original timeframes, and I think there were delays to it because of various reasons, it was roughly would have coincided with Warhammer Total War 3, but it didn't. It was quite a bit later, so I think there might have been an element of that. If you look at the early articles that were on Warhammer Community, and they were talking about Cathay, Kislev, and all this sort of stuff, and they were talking about the tie-ins to Warhammer 3, I kind of feel they missed the boat a little bit because of the delays. And you might have people that might have gone, oh, I've got this computer game, I love it, let's try it out. Maybe won't have transitioned across as naturally because they've played the game, they've put it down now.
Has Total War got Skaven and
all those factions? It's got every faction,
it's got everything now,
plus more.
literally every single fantasy faction.
Right. Yes.
I mean, it's just like me and my best mate Rob Telinovelli. We spent most of lockdown playing Warhammer Total War. So we basically like sit at home, I was at my sister's, but like doing, working from home stuff.
Yeah.
And then about 4 or
like
5 o'clock, we
Warhammer.
would just, we would load up the PC and we'd just like endlessly spin Warhammer Total War. And there was a point, like in deep, and we were like, isn't this great? That, you know what I mean? We've been playing Warhammer together since we were like 13. I met him. I met him because we were sat in a school gym in year 8, and one of us was reading a White Dwarf. I think he had a White Dwarf, and I was like, first person I've seen with a White Dwarf. You know what I mean? Like, play Warhammer. We were like, this is cool. And I think in many ways, Total War kind of scratched a big Warhammer fantasy itch. Because again, you get that you feel like you've had a battle, proper grand rumble,
proper fight.
Yeah, good question though. Like I think an aggressive release schedule would do wonders for Old World. 'Cause I think that's what everyone expected it to. We were like, every month there's going to be a new army,
or at least once a quarter.
Yeah,
I'd be happy with once a quarter.
Yeah, it's not, and sort of falling short.
Everyone buys more models than they paint or play, right? So just give them stuff. Give them stuff to buy.
We all know too well, don't we? Yeah. I've got this army. I don't play that game. I know, but I've got the army.
I've still got a Blood Bowl force just sitting there.
I do have one question. It's actually from me.
Ooh.
Oh. Is that allowed?
Well, I hope so. Well, I'm in charge of the buttons.
Oh, yeah.
You just turn us off.
I'll just turn the mics down. It's Hobgoblin, isn't it, you were talking about before? Models. Do we think that would be a really good way of getting the next generation into gaming, tabletop gaming? And B, should someone like Games Workshop or Steamforged or something like that grabbing hold of it to ensure that the younger generation gets an easy route into their stream?
Yes, absolutely, it would be a good game for getting a new generation in. Like if anyone, like a kid or adult, saw my collection of toys and didn't laugh at me, and instead they were like, "That looks cool. What do you do with them?" I would play Hobgoblin because it's quick to learn. No Games Workshop should not have a product like Hobgoblin. It's completely antithetical to their business. They want to sell you. They want to sell you toys, and they want to make it so you have to buy new toys every time they change the meta, which is always.
It's the dark side, and it's the dark side of the game that we all know they've got us like a little bit hooked because
they've tricked us into thinking that like constant balance updates are a favor, but they're not. They're just a way to force you to have to buy new models all the time.
Yeah,
and I don't think we want that in Old World. No. I think we want a little bit of balance.
Want some models, you just want some releases. Get some.
We want new releases. We want to be able to buy them on our own schedules, not because the meta dictates it every. It's not even. It's more than every 6 months, isn't it? Every time a book comes out, or an FAQ, or a
I think one of the things that Games Workshop miss now, certainly with games like Warhammer and those entry level things, and we're probably actually the perfect generation, which we got caught by this. The work they did with Milton Bradley. So you had Hero Quest, you had Battle Masters, you had games which were basically set in the Warhammer world or Warhammer Light that were easy to get a load of random stuff in the box. You can play your games. It's great fun. It's all quite simple, card-driven systems and stuff like this. And then you kind of move on to the more complicated bits and bobs. We don't really have that now. Hero Quest did get re-released, a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
But
New models
that's
and
not
everything.
really going to be an entry level for kids because the game's like best part of £100. You're
Yeah.
not going to get kids picking that up. Whereas when things were a bit more affordable and you could guess it for a birthday present, a Christmas present, or something without you parents going, if I must, it gets people into the world, even if it's not necessarily the game.
I'd love to know more about like the uptake rates of, because I think we've all got the sort of feeling that 40k and a lot of these games are booming. Like there's more. Past 5 years, there's more competition for tabletop gaming than there ever has been. So that suggests that the sector is getting bigger. Otherwise, you'll probably see that shrinking or staying stagnant. Like people don't invest and create games when there's no market. They're not all completely mad. So there's a feeling that it's getting bigger. But I'd love to know the stats on like the age of that. Because again, something me and Rob were talking about, just chatting a few weeks back, was like, we were talking about like how did we afford it, and we were like, I don't think it was expensive, but it wasn't like stupid. I remember my parents being like, yeah, we can get you a box, but like not much more. Like Christmas would be a big box and nothing else. Maybe you know the game itself, the latest edition. And I remember being able to afford like a blister every now and again. But now if I was like a young, if you're like 12, 13, 14 and you like want to get into 40k. Like Jesus, you eat hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Is that happening? Are kids getting into it?
Where I used to play in Bognor on a Tuesday, most of the young lads that were going, they were actually printing it.
Were they?
Yeah, they're printing their own. Yeah, especially the guard players. They were just printing thousands of guard and tanks. But yeah, that's the way they're getting around it now.
Yeah.
Because it is so expensive. Like my 16-year-old couldn't afford to buy one box on his own. It'd be me.
He could when he plays for Chelsea and he sponsors channel.
Yeah, maybe one day. But yeah, I think a lot of the kids are actually getting them printed by someone. Usually at the full size.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the way kids are going.
It's just so much money in it now. It's but GW again, they must be having this conversation. Because Old World's not their market, because Old World for sure is older generations. Well, not like Mega, no offense to anyone, but like older generations, because just the nature of the game. But if they're thinking about like 40k, I think that was a spear. I'm sure that was a spearhead intention. Was like, let's create a box.
Yeah,
I was going to shops to the younger kids and be like, just buy them this.
I was going to say, what's a spearhead? 80 quid, probably over 100 now, but. It is something you could ask for a birthday.
It's a birthday present.
And in theory, you can play with it forever, and then next birthday you get a box of whatever.
Yeah,
that's probably their thinking.
Or you save, I don't know how much pocket money children get, but you save up for some amount of time. I mean, it's not like it was cheap when we were kids, though.
No, I don't remember it being cheap. I just remember it being like, I could get models. Yeah. I remember it being something I could collect.
You could go and get like one Space Marine Terminator as well in a blister pack. You can't do that anymore. You have to buy 5.
Yeah. I remember endlessly just looking. And I think that's what made it attractive, because I could get, with pocket money, buy a model.
Yeah. And
go home and assemble it and then absolutely do an awful paint job and glue my fingers together. And I would literally have people come up to me being like, I think my granddad painted some Gretchen for me once, and people in the shop were like, who painted the, like, it was so bad. But
I used to paint in a room with no windows and like a 20-watt bulb, and with all the doors closed. And A, I couldn't see what I was doing, and B, I would get lightheaded and I didn't know why. And it's because all the super geek moves.
I'm great time.
Look at me now.
Well, as a sort of last bit I wanted to ask you guys was about like what's on your wish list next 6 to 12 months? What's your biggest ask? Taking it, you have to pick one thing of all the things we've talked about. We talked about model releases. We talked about like scenario support or something else to sort of tidy up the comp element. What's your main wish?
Make the Hell Cannon 20 points. That would be great. No, on it.
Imagine an army.
The obvious thing seems to say do something about infantry, but actually I'd like to do something about wizards, because there's absolutely no reason to take anything but a level 4 wizard. Like level 1s, you get one random spell. It's unlikely to go off. And because only one wizard can dispel a spell, even if you've got 4 in range. But but any one wizard can dispel as many spells as they like. There's just no reason to ever... if you're taking a wizard, it's a level 4. And I think that's a shame. I think I'd like to have a little tweak to the magic system where there's some benefit to taking multiple small wizards.
Yeah.
I don't know quite how you do it, but... I mean, if a wizard could only dispel as many times as their level, for example, then you could spam a bunch of small wizards and their big level 4 would only be able to do 4 dispels or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the magic system seems a little bit locked in that, like, everyone takes 1 level 4 and you take 2 if you've got a list that relies on blasting them with fireballs. And I'd like to see a little bit more variety to that.
Yeah, that sounds sensible. Michael, what about you, mate?
I mean, this is definitely not going to be happening anytime soon. But what I think
Dream big, Michael. Dream big.
what I think would be fun would be if we saw the return of the campaign boxes. So if you remember from back in the day, Tales of Isha, the Grudge of Drong, stuff like that. Little 2-faction series of linked games, slightly bonkers scenarios. Just adding the storytelling and narrative, bringing that to the fore. And we were talking about beforehand, weren't we, about fun coming out of the game a little bit because people take it all a little bit too seriously. Just bring in where it is all about the fun would just be brilliant.
Yeah. Nice.
Good answer, mate.
Good suggestions.
Wish I'd said that.
Next time.
Lads, this has been really fun chatting about Old World. You've reminded me of why I picked it up and got all those Britannias on the shelf, and it's felt quite a nostalgic chat, jumping back and thinking about GW games of old and stuff. So I've really enjoyed chatting through that with you, and we'll get you on to have the actual rumble.
Let's do it.
The building is fully finished, and it won't be a huge mission. We can just get you on and have a rumble.
Wicked.
Absolutely.
So thank you to both of you
No,
for
thanks
coming
for having
on.
us.
Thanks for having us.
To watchers. Nick,
Thanks,
as
Nick.
always, thank you for your telepathic communication and
More than welcome.
producing the show. Thanks to the folks that have watched us in the chat. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with the gents' suggestions? If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, because remember you get access to our Discord. It's $2.99. If you enjoy it, click in the description in the link below. Also check out Michael's channel, which I also put in the description. All right, folks,
Thank you
take it
much.
easy. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.